Yeah, I don't have the banner. In the larger community that they're living within, because they're not living in a deaf community. So my take is always having a few quick signs like bathroom or, that there's some kind of quick thing, a few functional signs that the people closest to that individual know, then that's great. But when you're really looking to augment or replace spoken language, we really want to consider giving an alternative that that everyone can understand and interact with that individual.
Sure. Yeah, that would be yeah, that's a great thing for people to understand. So, Lauren, parents are always concerned that introducing AAC, a tool like ours, so can prevent their child from developing speech. So, what would be your message to them, and what kind of examples can you share with us?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a logical fear that a lot of people have, and it's not just parents who worry about that. I've run into a lot of teachers and speech therapists who have also been perhaps reluctant to use AAC because of a worry that they'll choose the device or the system over their natural speech. But what we know from research in the field is not only in most cases, now I can't say that there's never been an individual who has kind of stopped speaking when they use AAC, and if that was the case, we would stop. But almost always, and most of the research shows that not only does it not prevent an individual from using their natural speech, it actually improves natural speech. And that's really the case with any kind of access to language through AAC of any sort. So I, for example, when earlier in my career, I was in a classroom where there happened to be a sign language interpreter. So sign was around a lot. And there was a little girl who really had very, very little speech. She had a little bit, she had a couple of words. But when the sign language interpreter started teaching her sign as an augmented means, her speech improved dramatically because suddenly she had the ability to play with language, learn, babble in another language. And then when her motor system kind of up, then she had that language to pull from. And that's what we are seeing with using forms of AAC, like apps or even paper-based, that it gives a child or an adult access to language while their motor system is still developing. And it helps to combat the delay of language development, because if your mouth isn't working quite right, for whatever reason, autism, apraxia, which can actually happen together, what's happening is you are then not having the opportunity to play with language, to babble, to put words together, to make mistakes, to have people around you expand for you and correct. You don't have any of that experience. So what we see is that in the absence of AAC, we are going to see larger language delays once speech does come in, because there wasn't they completely didn't have access to language in that period when they couldn't speak either at all or sufficiently. So the important takeaway with the concern about providing AAC and worrying that it's going to be a crutch, or worrying that it's going to be something that they're going to grow to rely on and then not use natural speech. The research suggests the opposite, and it's really important to provide that access so that they have the opportunity to kind of hone things and learn more.
Yeah, absolutely, Lauren. That's a question that we get asked many times as to, will my child become dependent on the device? And yeah, and we often say that it's like your spectacles. It's like you look at it as an enabler rather than a liability or something that you depend on, because otherwise you don't give them access at all. So yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's really important to think about the fact that one of the reasons why it does not become something that individuals will choose over natural speech if they can talk, AAC, even for the best augmented user, the best alternative user, is really hard and really slow. And people like hard and slow. So it's very, very rare for someone to choose AAC over talking when they can talk, because it is so much harder and slower. I actually encourage any parent or any person working to support someone who needs AAC to take some time and actually use the system. Don't talk, pretend that you have laryngitis, you can't speak. Have a couple of hours where all of your communication needs to be on that AAC system, and it will open your eyes to how hard it really is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, in fact, we do it as a practice once a year at Avaz, the Avaz team. During the month of October, every AAC Awareness month, we make sure that we don't talk amongst each other in the office, and we just turn on and use Avaz and see, and then get a sense of how difficult it is. So yeah, it's an experience to just stay with the device and see what it means.
Yeah, it would be great for parents, you know, if some of the parents know one another, it would be great for them to have, you know, like a little meal or something where parents of AAC users get together and just speak to one another using that form of AAC. It's eye-opening.
Exactly. I was going to say the same words, you pulled it out of my mouth. Yeah. Okay, so what is the best age that you suggest to get started with AAC?
Okay,
And
that's it's a really great question. And you might be surprised to hear how young I say. So as early as possible, especially when you have a known diagnosis from a very, very early, you know, especially if let's say a child has Angelman syndrome, or there's been an autism diagnosis super early. If it were my child and there was clearly a delay, I would start as early as possible. 12 months, 8 months, where I would start modeling. It's really important to remember the way that we learn language, just typically with typical speech. We learn language because from the moment we are born, we are exposed to people talking to us constantly. They are not only they're not only speaking around us, they are speaking to us and interacting with us. If you think about it, many kids begin speaking. My younger daughter her first word was at 8 months old. So if we think about when language, now my older daughter, her first words were more like 17 months. But both of them, you know, imagine if I never spoke to them until they started speaking. If I just waited, you know, how much would they have learned, as opposed to the fact that I was talking to them and responding to them and interacting with them that whole time. I would start as early as possible, because remember that all the research suggests that using AAC and modeling AAC is likely only to have positive effects. And when that individual can talk, they're going to talk. So you're certainly not going to have a negative effect by starting earlier, but you may have a very, very positive effect. And I do want to mention a resource to parents. There is a mom, her name is Dana Nieder. She's in the United States. She was, I believe, a special educator. And then she had a child with complex communication needs with apraxia. And she searched very, very, very early for a system here in the US that she could use with her daughter. I think her daughter might have been about 18 months when she started. Then what happened is this mom became very involved in AAC and teaching her daughter AAC, and she created a YouTube channel. She created a blog. Now that child uses a different app, but it's important to know that it really doesn't matter what that specific tool is, that the concepts are the same. And that blog is called Uncommon Sense blog. So let me share my screen. Let's see if I can get it to launch this video. This website. Oh. Just for you to know that it's there as a resource. So the really cool thing about Dana, her daughter still uses AAC some of the time, but she talks a lot now. So there's a perfect example of a child who was introduced very early to AAC, still uses it somewhat, but more at this point of an augmentative tool when she's not understood than she was much younger. When she, I'm not seeing it, it's not coming up. I'm not sure if it's my connection here, but Lalita, I can provide you with any links that I talk about to make available to families.
Yeah. We can
so it's called Uncommon Sense blog. Her name is Dana Nieder, N-I-E-D-E-R, and I'll provide those links. And she also has lots of videos of her children. So what she did when she realized the benefits of modeling, of talking to her children, her child with AAC who needed AAC, she has a typically developing son who's several years younger than her daughter Maya. And what she did was she began using AAC with Will, her baby boy, who is typically developing, and he was using AAC on a tablet device before he could talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
He developed speech naturally, and she felt that his language was even beyond where it would have been if he had not been exposed to language and had that opportunity to play with language when he was so young. So she's a great person to check out. And the neat thing about Dana is she went back to school after all of this, and she is now a speech language pathologist.
Wow, yeah, Dana is, it's an amazing blog that she has. And I remember reading this blog about her younger son, where she said she had introduced it early, and he had reached his milestones much earlier than typically the AAC child. Yeah, that was, yeah, I'll certainly forward that to the parents.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay. Also, sometimes parents, when they start using AAC, they sometimes feel that they're probably a little disappointed to say, oh, it's not progressing as much as it ought to. But yet, I'm sure that the child is making some progress. And how do we help them recognize these efforts of the child? And,
right. Yeah, that's a great question.
That faith going.
Yeah, so I think we need to look back at typical development. When we look, it can be really frustrating. When we have children with complex communication needs, whether that's because their speech is not clear enough to be understood, or whether that's because they have autism and it's just not, it's just not developing properly, and you just have a couple of words, and there's a lot of perhaps echolalia, where they are repeating what you're saying, but they're not coming up with novel kinds of things yet. When those things happen, I think it's really important to then think back to the way that language develops in typical children. And that in typical children, I would say in general, we give kids at least 18 months to 2 years before we ever expect really any language from them.
Right.
And all the while, we are modeling language for them, and we are interacting with language with them, but never, we don't really get frustrated in that period. That's just the process. So then if we take individuals with complex communication needs, they are likely to not only have perhaps motor challenges, but they are likely to, maybe they have cognitive impairment. They probably almost all have processing delays. where it takes them longer to understand, longer to learn. So if we think about typically to even begin speaking, we are giving kids 18 months, 2 years. But suddenly when we provide a tool like Avaz or any other augmentative communication solution, we get frustrated when they're not using it. We get the tool and then we put it in front of them and then we ask them a question. And when they're not using it, and even sometimes when they're not using it in a full sentence, we kind of immediately get frustrated.
Absolutely.
It's very grounding. Wait a minute. You know, if I just started talking to my infant when they were born, would I be frustrated when they're not speaking back to me in sentences right away?
Right.
So that can be really helpful to, you know, for us to kind of sit back a little bit and be like, this is okay. Because if it takes 18 months to 2 years to really get anything, and then it can take, you know, a couple of more years to really get sophisticated, think about that same amount of time for a child with a disability who's learning to use AAC, but add on the complexities of language delay, of cognitive impairment, of processing delay. Well, it could take twice as long, 3 times as long. So I really encourage parents and professionals to kind of pay attention to the little things. Pay attention. Are you getting more engagement? Are they paying more attention to language? Are they seeming more interested in the system? Are they using it a little bit? And try to be encouraged by those little signs and keep modeling. Keep talking to them with the system, just as we would keep talking to a typical child.
Right. Okay, here's a question. We are coming to the last few minutes. Here's a question from one of the students. How can we administer AAC like Avaz in a non-verbal autistic child with severe inattention? Is there some additional tips that you would suggest?
I will say that I understand. I've been there and it's hard. It is really hard. And for you to be okay, you know, that knowing that professionals too, we understand how challenging that can be. But one of the things that I see as one of the biggest challenges with teaching autistic kids who, you know, have a hard time attending is that a lot of people with autism really avoid demands. And we, as parents, as professionals, we are so eager to teach them AAC that the way that we do it is we tend to put the device in front of them and then start asking questions. And what happens is they perceive that device as a demand, and they are more likely to avoid demands. So my suggestion is always going to be find activities that they love. They absolutely love. And then during that activity, to use the device and model, but not require language. It's really hard for parents and professionals because we're thinking we need progress, we need data. But think about how we learn language. When we are teaching language to our you know, infants and toddlers, are we saying, you know, all right, you need to tell me this, say blue, say ball, say, we are not presenting language as a demand. It's more that it's an interaction while you are teaching language. But suddenly when it's an AAC user, we really have a tendency to make it a demand. And we are, you know, I think the most important takeaway is find activities that they love and talk to them and engage them and talk to them with the system, but not requiring them to use it. And be consistent and do it a lot and try to keep doing it even if you're not seeing a really big change, because it will happen, but the time amount can really vary and it can be a while. But it's worth it in the end. The wait and the perseverance is worth it.
Right. Okay, that's great. I mean, the fact that they can actually try activities that hold their attention better and it could keep them more engaged.
Right. Even if they seem like they're not paying attention, even if they seem like they're looking at something else,
Right, right.
If you think it's something that they're interested in, just keep talking about it. Keep in mind something about autistic kids. A lot of kids with autism, they seem to have eyes on the sides and the back of their heads. So even though perhaps they're not looking at the activity or looking, at the toy, they may be. They may be still kind of paying attention in the background.
Yeah. So one of the parents says, thank you for pointing out that we give about 18 months to regular kids to develop speech. Our son does not even look at the app. Should I use the app regularly in front of him, even if he does not really see the app?
I would. But one of the other things that might be helpful is Avaz has some really great tools built in where you can print out the screens on paper.
Right.
It may be easier if he's not attending at all. It may be easier to have some of the screens. So for example, if there's a food screen, to print out the food screen and have that on the refrigerator. And then every time you're going to go get him something to eat from the refrigerator, let's say, it was an apple. Every time you're going to get an apple, to point on that piece of paper on the fridge or the device, if you have it there, oh, it's time to eat an apple, where you're touching maybe eat and you're touching apple. Oh, I like apples. And just, again, not requiring, oh, we'll say apple and I'll give you an apple. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that parents and professionals are making, is this making it a demand, and we don't even realize we're doing it. It can really discourage. So, using modeling, having it available everywhere, and it can be a combination of the actual device and just pictures of the screen. You're going to be talking as you touch eat. Oh, I think we're going to eat an apple, and you just touch the word eat as you say eat. You didn't have to touch every word you said. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's another one that says, which mode is better, laptop, desktop, phone, or iPad?
I would probably say iPad. The challenge with phones is that they have a very small screen, and fewer buttons you have. Now, if it's tiny, you can't have the same number of buttons, because then they're just too teeny. The fewer buttons you have per screen, the more folders you have to go through, the harder it is to navigate to the words you want. Remember, I talked about the fact that people don't want to do stuff that's hard. So once you have fewer buttons per screen and more navigations, it ends up that it has to be something intensely motivating for them to even try.
Right.
So I would do the biggest screen that you can use that is truly portable. And from those options, it sounds like, an iPad or, an Android tablet, something that is lightweight and portable, that you can have a decent number of buttons on, so that you're not having to do so much navigation. I think a Chromebook, while it could be an additional support if you were in school, if you think about a Chromebook, they're not all that portable, and you can't kind of carry a laptop style device as easily. So that would be a suggestion.
Okay, and this is one last question. My child is speaking full sentences, only articulation is the problem. Can you help suggest some ideas for articulations? So do you want to take this in the next session? Or if this is relevant,
we can, articulation. Now, I am a speech language pathologist, and of course, I have worked quite a bit in the past on articulation. What I would say is to continue doing articulation therapy with a speech pathologist if you can, but marry that with, but make sure that you're if your child is really hard to understand, to make sure you're still providing that AAC, and maybe even practicing the articulation while you talk with the device, because what you don't want to happen is language to fall behind while your child's motor system is catching up. So you still do those traditional kinds of articulation therapy. And with kids who are gaining language skills, natural speech, I would absolutely encourage that. But also having AAC as a way to support language development until, they can catch up a little bit more with their natural speech and intelligibility.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we will end this session, and we will continue. We have a couple more questions, but I think we'll take that up in the next session. Okay,
Okay.
so thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us, and
You're
yeah,
welcome.
have a great conference at Closing the Gap today.
Yep, I'm gonna head down now.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
great. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Yep, take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Take care. The rest of the parents, please hold on. Lauren, you can turn off your video and
All right. Okay. All right. See you later.
yeah, see you. Bye-bye. Okay, parents, so there is a couple more questions that you have asked. We will certainly take it up now that you have all, oh, there are lots more pouring in the last few minutes. I wish these had come in a little earlier. Yeah, but Kamini Lakhani, yeah, very informative webinar. I look forward to the others. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, in fact, today's was a little more generic, I would say, but I think the next time it would be a lot more with a lot more examples. And Lauren is a great resource. We've always relied on her for giving us ideas and tips and how to improve Avaz. She's been with us for a long time, so and she's a great resource to lean on to. So we'll certainly take up this at a later point. So just to recap some of the things she did say about sign language. So many people wonder whether sign language is a good idea, but the thing is it only opens up to a very, very limited set of people. And for people who need access to language, and even if you're single word communicators, Avaz and AAC is still a great option because it helps you actually build your sentence length. And yeah, 12 months to 18 months is a great age to start with AAC and Avaz. She said even as young as 8 months is a good idea. And Dana Nieder's blog, it's called The Uncommon Sense. It's a wonderful blog. Please do follow it. There's a lot of learning. It's a lot of inspiration by a mother who's actually been using it and has been rewarded with great outcomes. And yeah, keep modeling. And so we'll have more of it in the next session. Yeah, so so the next few sessions will be more in detail, and she will give you a lot more examples. And also just a reminder to say that we do have this sale that is discount that is going on from the 1st to the 15th of October in celebration of AAC Awareness Month. So it's available at 50% discount, and this includes all of Avaz products. So you can feel free to avail the discount. You can also log into our website and make the purchase. Both options are available either from the App Store or from the website. Now, the next few sessions, the next one is going to be on AAC integration. And we do have questions related to prompting. Well, let me just see what it has. Some of the typical questions. And how do you integrate Avaz into your child's daily life? So I mean, we can ask her to share some examples and actual situations where it would be applicable. And then when we say, so how long do you allow your child to start babbling? That means just using, should you allow him to use the device, explore the device, to how long do you wait for that to go on? Also things like most kids are stuck at single words. How do you make them move on beyond that and into simple sentences? So these are all coming up in the next few sessions. So this is in the next session, and we look forward to having you all back in the next session. So please do make sure that you log in on time because there are limited seats. So thank you once again for taking some time out on your holiday. I hope it's been worth your while. So look forward to seeing you all back next week. Okay, bye-bye and take care. Have a great day and wishing you a great Gandhi Jayanti.